pleased that introductions do have that other purpose of allowing people to come into the room before the actual reading begins. So I will say good evening, and on behalf of the Harvard Department of English and American Language and Literature and the Woodberry Poetry Room, it is my great honor to introduce and to welcome this evening's Morris Gray lecturer, the poet Geoffrey Hill. In his most recent work, the book-length poetic sequence titled The Triumph of Love, Hill celebrates several cultural and historical figures whose courage and moral imagination and whose scrupulous, often self-sacrificing acts of witness, devotion, or artistic making shine out from within the shadows of history. One of these luminaries is the 20th century Polish poet and intellectual Alexander Watt. And one of the things for which I'm grateful in reading Mr. Hill's work is the introduction not just to Watt's poetry, but to a book called My Century, which is made up of conversations that Watt had with Czesław Miłosz. And in the course of these conversations, Watt recalls how his repeated periods of imprisonment at the hands of several totalitarian regimes included a moment in which he crystallized a completely new understanding of literature. And I'll just quote from this conversation. Watt says, "Literature is insight and synthesis, which means that poetry ultimately is heroic." He continues, "Naked, weak, hungry, trembling, endangered by all the elements, all the beasts and demons, the cavemen performed that act of heroism for consolation in the deepest sense of the word. And at that time there in Lubyanka, the political prison and headquarters of the secret police in Soviet Union, this seemed to me the essence of literature and the source of its legitimacy in the world. Consolation for a weak, naked caveman." Now, in addition to its unique combination of severe brilliance, learning, intricacy, and gravity, the distinction of Geoffrey Hill's poetry lies partly in its way of embodying Watt's category of the heroic. But the adversarial stakes are still more complex and troubling than in Alexander Watt's account, unless we stress Watt's word demons, and unless we move our locus of the demonic not just inside the cave, but inside those who shelter there. For Hill confronts not merely the exposure and weakness of humankind, not simply our mortality and vulnerability, but also our renewed capacity to forget, betray, wound, kill, or look away. He writes not simply for a weak, naked caveman, but against a strong, brutally equipped sequence of cavemen. If there is consolation in Hill's magnificently scathing, grievously beautiful work, it is, quote, a sad and angry consolation. It is a fierce enactment of what Wallace Stevens meant by the phrase, "the way good solace seethes." And if there is triumph, as in the Petrarchan genre, the Petrarchan genre that partly shapes his most recent book, such triumph derives as fully from Hill's capacity for outrage and sorrow as from his great gifts as a poet, as a maker of a profound and enduring verbal music. As you will hear tonight, Geoffrey Hill's music and its attendant dictions and burdens are surprisingly varied, modulating between elevated and caustic, lavish and spare, densely image-laden and limpidly discursive. moments of humor, there are moments of tenderness, of pastoral solicitude, lamenting admissions that love, decency, endurance are traceable within the moral landscape. At the level of genre, Hill's variousness and capacity for originary synthesis, Barth's word again, have distinguished his work from the beginning. A condensed recapitulation of Genesis merges with first-person testimony. Mercian hymns blend pre-medieval chronicle with 20th century recollections of childhood. Most recently, The Triumphs of Love blends Renaissance triunfo with a Baroque Benjaminian Trauerspiel, blends Canzoni of Repentance with a millennial Satyricon, a Dead March with Oblation. Throughout his 8 books of poetry and 2 books of prose, Hill has waged what he calls the struggle for a noble vernacular, a struggle conducted by such predecessors as Petrarch, Sidney, Dryden, Milton, Ruskin. A noble vernacular. And to quote Stevens again, there is no element more conspicuously lacking from contemporary poetry than nobility. In his poem, Churchill's Funeral, Hill writes, "Nobilmente it rises from silence, the grand tune, and goes something like this." Please welcome Geoffrey Hill.
Well, I see that this is, although it's called a Morris Gray lecture, it seems to, as it were, drift into being the Morris Gray reading. On the other hand, it will be mainly a reading that I give, but if I didn't say a few words, I would feel that I was, as it were, slighting the other formal part of the evening, and I want to feel that I've earned my very generous honorarium. I just have 2 or 3 prefatory remarks. 20 years ago, I did a version of Ibsen's Brand for the National Theatre in London. And although the production was not a success, to put it mildly, I did learn 2 things from working on Brand that I think have influenced my more recent work. Ibsen himself said that he was looking for a way of writing which one could move from tragedy to farce very rapidly. I think that one sentence by Ibsen has had a very considerable effect on my thinking about writing. Another thing that I think I should stress is that I'm of the generation of 1932. When the Second World War began, I was 7. When it finished, I was 13. And like many others of that age group, those who survived, memory is for me a sacred force. I think one feels an intense need not to waste time that might have been better used by the others had they lived. And I think I need to point also to this conflict of feelings in my writing, which the Ibsen axiom helps me to control, this moving very rapidly from tragedy to farce and from farce to tragedy. In 1939, Britain, to all appearances, though I think it was mainly appearance, was the heart of a vast empire. By 1945, it was a bankrupt pensioner of the USA. And for those of us coming to consciousness, on the brink of our adult consciousness then, I think this is something that struck us very forcibly. We felt that something very radical had happened to the whole texture of our nation and our life within it. Final thing I want to say is that I do have a belief, naive or not, in intrinsic value. And I do have a dislike for lobbyists, promoters and entrepreneurs. I have a dislike for those who swing public judgments to accord with their private bias and prejudice, which they call taste. I feel the need to say, I wouldn't have said this except that a good deal of the impetus, and some would say animus, of the triumph of love do swing on these 3 or 4 main categories that I just tried to outline for you. Just want to give you, I'm not preaching, I just want to give you a sense of the way the feel of the thing is. What I will do is this, I will begin and end with readings from the new book, The Triumph of Love. And in the middle, as a kind of intermezzo, I will read one sequence from the previous book, Canaan. To try to, it's very difficult, it's very, very difficult to try to exert sections from The Triumph of Love. To try to give a shape to the reading, I've taken things out from different parts of the sequence, but I've arbitrarily given them a sort of collective title. So I'm going to read them in sort of 3 groups. A group of Second World War poems, a group which will try to convey reasons for and purpose in writing. Those 2 will be at the first part of the reading. When I come back to the Triumph of Love, at the end, the section will be one that I've arbitrarily chosen to call Pratfalls and Angels. And then in the middle there will be this intermezzo, a sequence from the other book, Canaan. I will give you the numbers of the sections in case a few people have copies of the text with them. Section 13, and as I say, this is, as it were, Second World War. Whose lives are hidden in God? Whose? Who can now tell what was taken, or where, or how, or whether it was received? How ditched, divested, clamped, sifted, overlaid, raked over, grassed over, spread around, rotted down with leaf mold, accepted as civic concrete, reinforceable base cinder blocks, tipped into Danube, Rhine, Vistula, dredged up with the Baltic and the Pontic sludge, committed in absentia to solemn elevation, Trauermusik, musique funèbre, funeral music, for male and female voices, ringingly a cappella, made for double-string choirs, congregated brass, choice performers on baroque trumpets, hefting like glass blowers, inventions of supreme order. 19. If you so wish to construe this, I shall say only, the Jew is not beholden to forgiveness of pity. You will have to go forward, block by block, for pity's sake, irresolute as granite. Now move to the next section. 20. From the book of Daniel, am I correct? Quite correct, sir. Permit me. Refocus that Jew. Yes, there, that one. You see him burning, dropping feet first in a composed manner, still in suspension from the housetop. It will take him forever caught at this instant of world exposure. In close-up, he maintains appearance, Semitic Ur-Engel, terminal agony nonetheless interminable, the young martyrs aging in the fire. Thank you, Hauptmann. Schauspieler? Run it through again, and forever he stretches his wings of flame upon instruction. The name battle in the second line refers to a British Second World War aircraft known as the Fairey battle. Fairey was the name of the company that built it. It was the only light bomber available to the British and French during the German blitzkrieg on France in May 1940. It was an appalling plane, one of the worst planes ever built, equaled only by the Brewster Buffalo. At 7 even, I knew the much vaunted battle was a dud. First it was a dud, then a gallant write-off. Honor the young men whose eager fate was to steer that droopy coat against the Meuse bridgeheads. The Fairey's swordfish had an ungainly, frail strength, cranking in at sea level, wheels whacked by Channel spindrift. Ingratitude still gets to me, the unfairness and waste of survival. A nation with so many memorials, but no memory. 77. Lancaster in this is the four-engined British night bomber. By what right did Keyes or my cousins Lancaster or the trapped below decks watch of Peter's clangorous old destroyer escort serve to enfranchise these strange children, pitiless in their ignorance and contempt? I know places where grief has stood mute howling for half a century, self-grafted to unself, till it is something like these now familiar alien hatreds, coarse efflorescence over the dead proprieties, strong words of Christian hope sub rosa, the unmentionable graffiti. 78. You say how you were struck by the unnatural brightness of marigolds, and is this manic or what? Are clowns depressives? The open secret is to act well. Can the now silent witnesses be questioned? What hope remains to get him out alive? I'm sorry, her. Tomorrow he died, became war dead, picked off the sky's face. 50 years back the dead will hear and be broken. Get off the line. Who are you to say I sound funny? '97. Devouring our names, they possess and destroy by numbers. The numbered, the numberless, as graphs of totality, pose annihilation. each sensate corpse in its fatal mass solitariness excites multiples of infliction. A particular dull yard on a dull smoky day, this and this, a unique face, indistinguishable, this, these, choked in a cesspit of leaking shale. 99. So be that jaw and a rib stove, gabardine hump of pain, sopping the cobble slime with its ragged beard. Don't even pray. Don't give them any more to work on. I can understand that. If witness meant witness, all could be martyrs. That concludes the somewhat arbitrarily brought together section called poem sections relating to the Second World War. It's very difficult to make a clean cut. I mean, it was overlapping. But here's the second group I've selected. Is that funny noise coming from this or from where? Can you hear me? I mean, at the pitch I'm reading, can you hear me in the back? Is that okay? This group is, these are very arbitrary titles, Reasons for and Purposes in Writing a Sequence such as this. 51. Whatever may be meant by moral landscape, it is for me increasingly a terrain seen in cross-section, igneous, sedimentary, conglomerate, metamorphic rock strata, in which particular grace, individual love, decency, endurance are traceable across the faults. 52. Admittedly, at times, this moral landscape, to my exasperated ear, emits archaic burrings, like a small, high-fenced electricity substation of uncertain age in a field corner, where the flies gather and old horses shake their sides. 53. But leave it now, leave it. As you left a washed-out day at Stourport or the Lickey, improvised rain hats, mulch for papier-mâché, and the chips floating. Leave it now, leave it, give it over to that all-gathering general English light, in which each separate bead of drizzle at its own form tip stands as revelation. Portrait of morning's autodidact, proud, not willing to drop the increasingly evident burden of shamed gratitude to his own dead and to those not his own. Pandora Barraclough, for instance, his desire to keep alive recollection of what they were put to, though not for his sake, not for this future, and not rooted, God help us. They were as he now is, dispossessed even in the scant subsistence of disturbed folk memory. Each time, the salving of the waste, less and less expected. Yet time and again, salvific, like the barely recognized beauty of the potato vine in its places of lowly flowering. 70. Active virtue, that which shall contain its own passion in the public weal, do you follow? Or can you at least take the drift of the thing? The struggle for a noble vernacular, this did not end with Petrarch. But where is it? Where has it got us? Does it stop in our case with Dryden, or perhaps Milton's political sonnets? The cherished stock hacked into ransom and ruin, the voices of distinction far back indistinct. Still, I'm convinced that shaping, voicing are types of civic action, or slightly to refashion this, that Wordsworth's two prefaces stand with his great tract on the Convention of Sintra, witnessing to the Praesidium in the sacred name of things betrayed. Intrinsic value I am somewhat less sure of. It seems implicate with active virtue, but I cannot say how precisely. Partaking of both fact and recognition, it must be, therefore, in effect, at once agent and predicate, imponderables brought home to the brute mass and detail of the world, there by some to be pondered. Um, 96. Ignorant, assured, there comes to us a voice unchallengeable of the foundations, distinct authority devoted to indistinction. With what proximity to justice stands the record of mischance? Heroic hit or miss, the air so full of flack and tracer, legend says, you pray to live unnoticed. Mr. Ives took Emersonian self-reliance the whole way on that. Melville, half immolated, rebuilt the pyre. Holst, sometime later, stumbled on Dharma. What can I say? At worst and best of blind ennoblement, floodwater hunched, shouldering at the weir, the hatred that is in the nature of love. The whole keeping of Augustine's city of God is our witness, vindicated even to us in a widow's portion of the law's majesty of surrender. 100 words or fewer engrafted by Tyndall's unshowy diligence. It is all there, but we are not all there. Read that how you will. Cursed be he that removeth his neighbour's mark, Mosaic statute to which Ruskin was steadfast. If Pound had stood so, he might not have founded. Paul's reinscription of the kenotic hymn, God made himself of no reputation, took the shape of a servant, is our manumission. Zion, new-centered, at the circumference of the world's concentration. Ruskin's wedded incapacity, for which he has been scourged many times with derision, does not render his vision blind or his suffering impotent. Fellow labouring master-servant of forced flavigerer, to us he appears some half-fabulous field-ditcher who prized up from a stone-wedged hedge-root the lost, amazing crown. 148. This is the last of the section called Reasons for and Purposes in Writing. Obnoxious means far back within itself, easily wounded. But vulnerable, proud anger is, I find, a related self of covetousness. I came late to seeing that. Actually, I had to be shown it. What I saw was rough and still pains me. Perhaps it should pain me more. Pride is our crux. Be angry but not proud, where that means vainglorious. Take Leopardi's words, or to be accurate, B.V.'s English cast of them, when he found Tasso's poor scratch of a memorial barely showing among the cold slabs of defunct pomp. It seemed a sad and angry consolation. So, Croker, Maxica, O'Shem, I ask you, what are poems for? They are to console us with their own gift, which is like perfect pitch. Let us commit that to our dust. What ought a poem to be? Answer, a sad and angry consolation. What is the poem? What figures? Say, a sad and angry consolation. That's beautiful. Once more, a sad and angry consolation. I now turn for the interim to a sequence from the earlier book, Kings. It's a sequence with the title De Jure Belliac Pacis, and it's dedicated specifically in memory of Hans Bernd von Heften, 1905-1944, but it's also dedicated to the other members of the Christian resistance against Hitler, most of whom were arrested in the wake of the failed bomb plot of July the 20th, 1944, tortured, tried, put to death. Kreisau, a name which occurs twice in the sequence, it was the ancestral home of the Graf von Moltke, and the beehives of Kreisau are where his wife, the Gravin von Moltke, hid the secret documents, actually in the beehives, so that that would be the last place the authorities would want to look for them. And they survived and were published in post-war, after the war. The people moves as one spirit unfettered, claim our assessors of stone. When the nations fall dispossessed, such conjurings possess them. Elaborate barren fountains, projected aqueducts where water is no longer found. Where would one find Grotius for that matter? The secular justice clamant among psalms, huge-fisted visionary Comenius. Could none predict these haughty degradations, as now your high-strung martyred resistance serves to consecrate the liberties of Maastricht? The iron-beamed engine shed has chapel windows, glare-eyed you spun. The hooks are still in the beam. A sun patch drains to nothing. Here the chopped blades sluiced into place. Here the abused blood set its own reeds. Time passes, strengthening and fading. Europa Hetera displays her parts. the triumph to tax even Dürer's resplendent economy in rictus and graven sorrow. On some envisioned Rathaus clock geared like a mill, the dragon strikes. The archangel, unseeing, unbowed, chimes with each stroke. You foretold us, hazarding the prescribed tongue of piety and shame, plain righteousness committed with much else to Kreisau's bees for their particular keeping. We might have kept your Christian inhibitions, faithful, non-jurant, in the singing court of dread at the grid of extortion, but chose pity. This pity is shameless, unlike memory, though both can draw sugar from iron. Pity alone with its rage settles on multitudes, as the phoenix sought from 100 cities tribute of requiting flame. In Plötzensee, where you were hanged, they now hang tokens of reparation, and in good faith compound with Cicero's maxims, Schiller's chant, your silenced verities. To the high-minded base metal forgers of this common Europe, community of parody, you stand eccentric as a prophet. There is no better vision that I can summon. You were upheld on the strong wings of the Psalms before you died. Evil is not good's absence, but gravity's everlasting bedrock, and its fatal chains, inert, violent, the suffrage of our days. Not harmonies, harmonics, astral whisperings light years above the stave, groans, murmurs, cries, tappings from cell to cell. It is a night watch, indeterminate and of vast concentration of those redeeming their pledged fear, who strike faith from the hard rock of God's fallenness. Their pain draws recompense beyond our grasp of recapitulation. Slurred clangor, cavernous and chained haltings, echo from time's inchoate music. The theme standing proclaimed only in the final measures, Vexilla Regis, uplifted by Rüdiger Schleicher's violin. Those 3 eternal days, Christus did not lie shackled in death, but found out your stark Reich, deep-buried hypercausts, dense for the harrowing, held there since time so holds within itself, slow, precise Feldgiebel, chivalrous Hofacker, clamped in their silence, keeps also Gödel's doubled, many times consummated agony. In whatever fortress, on whatever foundation, then, now, in eternal, the Spirit bears witness through its broken flesh to grace more enduring even than mortal corruption, ineradicable and rightly so. Smart whip tap at book top, absolute license of the demons to wreak their correction. Elsewhere they are fixed self-torches in sulphur. As there is a God elsewhere of jealous mercy, this is not news. The book of Daniel's strength unwritten, Zion's resurgent lamentation, in Kreisau's witnessing, here undenizened the sand to the old waste. So let the rites be speculation, fantastic pickings, late gold of Europa in her brief modish rags, Schindler, Schindler. But if, and if nowhere but here, archives for catacombs, letters, codes, prayers, film scraps, dossier, shale of crunched shellac, new depths of invention, children's songs to mask torture. Christus, it is not your stable. It will serve as well as any other den or shippen the arraigned truth. The chorus with its gifts of humiliation, incense and fumitory. Lucerna, the soul flame, as it has stood through such ages, ebbing and again lambent, replenished in its stoop of clay. The final section. Just about right. The final section is called Pratfalls and Angels. I mean, this is the only time it can be called Pratfalls and Angels, but I don't think it's called that in the book. This is sort of one-off. Pratfalls and Angels. 34. Boom, boom, obnoxious, chthonic old fart. Boom, 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 boom. No thanks to that stiff Kortseniowski. Obsolete shallow draft, 15-inch Garnick's imperial monitor perched rudderless on a mud bank in mid-river, exposing himself to Boria Bulagar. 37. Shameless old man, bent on committing more public nuisance, incontinent fury wetting the air, impotently bereft satire, charged with erudition, put up by the defense to be his own accuser. 39. Rancorous, narcissistic old sod, what makes him go on? We thought, hoped rather, he might be dead. Too bad. So how much more does he have of injury time? 72. Ethics of the far edge. Give the old bugger a shove, gentlemen a shout. 73. I may be gone some time. Hallelujah. Confession and recantation in fridge. 74. For Sinner the poet, see under errata. 129. One or two illustrations might help us, Jeff, to take a fix on your position, anomalous as it is. 2 Kokoschkas and 1 Rembrandt. Rembrandt's unfinished The Concord of the State, okay. The Masaryk portrait and What We Are Fighting For, okay. Okay? Ta-da, ta-da. 130. Milton, the political pamphlets. Blake in old age reaffirming the hierarchies. Pays Passim virtually. Bernanos, if only for having written La colère des imbéciles rompre le monde. Radnoti at bord, the great self-recovery of that. 131. Mourning registers as celebration. Haydn at 66, his clowning majesty of invention never bettered. He means, I think, the late Erbilie quartets, Ed. Bartok dying in New York, unfinished music among the sickbed detritus. I would have liked to know, I may yet know, whether the hidden part which most engages me is closer to nub, crux, crank, or orifice. Crank, probably. The system which converts rotary to rectilinear motion is called the eccentric. Whichever it is, it has my tie. The nerve required to keep standing, pedaling, grinning inanely strikes me splat as more than temperamental luck. It is a formal self-distancing, but like choreography. You could clog to some late Haydn without injuring either tradition. Please, my foot. Ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. Angels. $114. From the angels of irrational decision and of reversed order to the angel of improvisation. From the angel of improvisation to the angels of tannic acid, salicyl, and plain water. From the angel of advantage, where is the angel of recorded delivery? From the angels of advantage lost, of sacrifice, of surrender, to the angels of merciful intervention and final custody. $126. To the short-sighted citizen angel, the angel of assimilation, I will not run, dance, kowtow to entertain thugs, perverts, parvenus, perjurers from the stifled lamentation angel. To that dying power, from the trim, well-clad angel of death, his insignia and instruments. From that to the violated angel of eternal audit, and to eternity, the ashen-fleshed, wrenched, silent, untouched, unhearing angel of forgiveness. $141. From the terrible angel of procreation to the angel in hiding of senility, to the autonomous angel from the several angels of solitude, CC, angel of self-alienation, angel of solitary confinement. From the angel of the morning goldfix to the angels of mandragora and ripoff, to the demotic angels and the angels of repulsion attraction, the loud-winged angels of equal sacrifice, the soul angels standing in for hope and despair. $142. To the angel of the approved estimates, to the angels of promise across the entire spectrum, to the surplus angels of acquisition. I cannot even hear the new instructions, let alone obey them. Where, you will say, does explanation end and confession begin? To know all is to forgive all, a maxim more wicked even than it is stupid. Forgive me, would you ever? but that, by my reckoning, is not the sum. I have introduced, it is true, laws et vituperatio as a formality. Still, this formal thing is less clear in situ. That possibly is why I appeal to it. The angels of sacral equivocation, they now tell me, are redundant. We have lost the bloody question. Vide State Trials Elizabethan, ed. Though you can count on there being some bloody question or other, one does more than barely survive. Less hands on the outcome or by or around it. Why do I think urgently of beach sewage? At one source, Moltke, the two Bonhoeffers, von Heften, suffered the bloody question and did nobly thereby. Late praise costs nothing. To the angels of inconclusive right on both sides, to the angel of the last minutes, to the angel of our estimated times of arrival and departure. Thank you.
Mention that there's a reception following the reading after that. Thank you very much. Thank you. Geoffrey.